nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't bear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, welcome to another analysis. I don't really do live streams very often. I feel like I need a little bit of practice actually, but this is quite a important case, or certainly quite close to my heart. I think the reason why I'm interested in this case is because of the people involved. I mean. What I mean is, that's true generally in true crime, but particularly in this case, I feel like I'm someone who's got a bit of a cycling background myself, and I think we're dealing with high performance people here. That is definitely unusual in true crime. You don't always. It's not every day that you're dealing with someone who's a world champion. I think that the last time we had something like that was Oscar Pistorius, right? Someone who's really excelling in sport. There was also, to some extent, O.J. Simpson. But I think you'll agree with me that cases that in high-profile criminal cases that involve sports people are fairly unusual, right? By the way, if you're hearing loud banging sounds in the background, there's this kind of a big thunderstorm playing out. Timmy says hi. But yeah, so it's not just the sport aspect. It's also a very interesting case, given you don't always see a fugitive aspect. You might say we saw it with Brian Laundrie, but I think you'll agree with me that it is fairly rare in true crime that someone is on the run from the law, and that's different to you haven't been charged or whatever. It's where you, the prime suspect, and the police are pursuing you. And I think she was on the run for, was it 43 days, something like that, more than a month, which is quite a lot more than Vicky and Casey White were. It's quite a long time to elude the authorities. So can any of you remember what it was that allowed Kaitlin to kind of get out of police custody to begin with? Can any of you remember that? I'm pleased to see about 100 of you in chat. I did sort of feel like if there are 100 of you, then it's sort of worthwhile for me that there's enough of you. Doing a live, then it's kind of worthwhile going live and sort of going to the trouble to do this sort of analysis. There we go. We've got a couple of people who've got good memories. Stephanie says an error on her birth date, incorrect birth date. That was essentially two numbers on like a document that were not correct, and as a result of that, the police had to release her, and because of that, she ended up being on the run for a really long time, and that created a kind of an artificially exciting post incident narrative. And of course, she's recently just run away again. So I've got another question for you guys. I don't know whether you've read the media or not, but do you think Kaitlin's second escape was premeditated? Right? So I'm sure you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but Kaitlin just a few days ago escaped police custody for 10 minutes. Do you think that escape attempt was premeditated? Melstiller says, didn't she have her sister's passport? Sleuth and Sandal says, wow, I'm not clued in on this case yet. So if you don't know anything about this case, we are going to do a brief review, but I kind of recommend you rather listen to the playlist to get yourself sort of caught up to speed. Catherine says absolutely premeditated. Stephanie says, wasn't she at a medical facility? Okay, so we're going to deal with why it is definitely premeditated. But before we do, I want to just review that bit of information about the that technical error that allowed Kaitlin to escape the authorities in the first place.
Kaitlin Armstrong, a birthday discrepancy prevented early arrest. Just 2 stray digits is all it took to allow Kaitlin Armstrong to slip through the cracks. The legal loophole was the result of a clerical error, typing in her birth date as April instead of November. We know Kaitlin was brought in for questioning on May 12th. What's been recently released during a press conference today is that a discrepancy in the Austin PD's report management system didn't match a Class B warrant. If the dates had matched, they would have been able to hold Kaitlin for about 24 hours. In true crime and in the courtroom, details matter. I picked up fairly on certain sources describing Kaitlin as 35 years old, but her birthday is on November 21st. It took a whole week for a new warrant to be issued. The new warrant was issued on May 19th and had her birth date correct as November 21st. Kaitlin Armstrong remains at large and, as far as we know, is in the New York area at present. This is one of the last pictures taken of her, and this is a screen grab from her Facebook profile.
So the other thing that makes this case quite interesting are the measures that Kaitlin took to escape, to conceal her identity. If you compare what she did to, let's say, Casey and Vicky White, she traveled to another country. She allegedly had plastic surgery. She altered her appearance. She also seemed to be traveling on her sister's passport. It's not the easiest thing in the world to travel abroad while there's kind of a warrant out for your arrest kind of thing. I'm trying to think what the other thing is. She also managed to sell her vehicle, which Casey and Vicky White did as well. But she dyed her hair, and and then the interesting thing with this whole idea of her changing her appearance. Did she try to do the same when she tried to escape the second time? Okay, so what are we going to look at next? So for those who don't know too much about this case, just stand by. I'll do a brief review in a moment. I just want to update those of you who do know the case with some of the latest news. And that is from this article from the Daily Mail. Killer yoga teacher Kaitlin Armstrong trained for a failed escape for months and wore thermal pants under her prison jumpsuit to disguise herself as an inmate. Obviously, she knew that the striped prison garb was going to stand out, and so she knew she was going to need to deal with that, and so she was wearing thermal pants. So very definitely premeditated. And I do wonder, I often talk about intertextuality. I do wonder whether Kaitlin was aware of that other inmate that had recently escaped, and also whether that gave her confidence. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. The other thing that's interesting with this case that some people didn't like is the fact that she's referred to as a yoga teacher. And the reason why it's upsetting to some people is yoga is supposed to be, om, and, people who are very, what's the word? People that are very balanced, people that are very, trying to think of the right terms, in tune with themselves, at peace, all that kind of thing. And this seemed to be at odds with that whole idea. And it's the same thing that I say so often in true crime. This isn't about you. If you're a yoga person, it's not about how balanced you are as an individual. It's how balanced she was. But I certainly remember people resenting the fact that the yoga aspect was even brought up. And I do think it is relevant because this is actually an unusual case where the motive seems to be someone is triggered, and also the revenge motive seems extremely explicit. Now, of course, we don't know for a fact, it's not been proven in court who committed this crime. So also, folks in chat, please be aware of people making, absolute ambiguous statements of guilt. But the point is, there are very few high-profile crimes we deal with where revenge is the absolute motive. I mean, if you think about Jodi Arias, do you think the motive there was revenge? Now, you might say, yes, but I would say it was jealousy. And I do think jealousy is a factor in this case. And the defense have been at pains to say there was no love triangle, or it was actually a love rectangle. And the other dimension of the rectangle was someone who was in a relationship with Mo, kind of like a Davo version of that. Someone was in a relationship with Mo, and that person, I guess, followed her to Austin and saw her with Colin Strickland, and then that person snapped, or whatever it is. I'm just saying, it's seldom that you see such a what's the word? Explicitly emotional crime, if that is what this is, right? And I think it is a worthwhile thing to think about. Is this more about jealousy, or is it about revenge, right? I wonder what you guys think. Snowline says, I voted for all of the above. Now, let's just go through some of the details here, and then we'll get to some other information. The other dimension to this case that I find interesting is Colin Strickland. There's this idea of a love triangle, and you can get to know Mo Wilson quite well, and she's an extraordinary athlete. There's a picture of her behind me, which is from Bicycling magazine. Now, she was someone who was such a high performer that she appeared in magazines and on the cover of magazines and sponsored by, some of the top sponsors. And then her friend, Colin, was also a really well-known, well-respected athlete. And so that is the part that's really surprising, is you had two sports folk that seem to be superhuman in certain ways. And then the question was, were they involved in some sort of relationship? And then you have someone that's on the outside of that, potentially, that wasn't very happy with the situation, and perhaps felt threatened by what was possibly taking place. Anyway, let's deal with this article. So it says that she vigorously exercised. Now, you guys know that I've spoken about how the importance of identity. I must say, this website is crazy, the amount of ads that are always on it. You can barely read the text. But in any event, if you look at the fact that she vigorously exercised, and then you say, is identity an important part of true crime? Well, look at who she was in a relationship with a sportsman. So you can see that she prepared for her escape in terms of a physical, in a physical way, right? She wore thermal pants under a prison uniform. That's in a way like an exercise outfit, right? She chose her gear for her sprint, and you actually saw her quite clearly out sprinting the officer and out hurdling the officer as well. She was observed routinely exercising despite allegedly having a leg injury while inside the Travis County Correctional Complex. So she's exercising, I guess, her running skills, perhaps her jumping skills, perhaps her dodging skills, and then she apparently said that she had a leg injury, right? And that was why she needed to go for medical treatment. And so it says here Armstrong had also worn thermal trousers beneath a county issued black and white striped uniform pants, which she stripped off during the foot pursuit to disguise her identity as an inmate. That's according to the affidavit. So this is the actual pursuit. Shall we have a look at it? Sorry about that. Are we almost done? Annoying music, isn't it? Okay, let's go.
America NA, member FDIC, equal credit opportunity lender. Lowe's knows how to. America NA, member
There she
FDIC,
goes.
equal credit opportunity lender.
Okay. Okay, so there you can see the two Kaitlins. There's the Kaitlin with the original hair and her original nose, and her defense is saying she didn't actually have plastic surgery. Does her appearance look altered in any way? So anyway, it goes on to say, due to recent activity of exercising vigorously and complaints of injury to secure off-site medical appointment and restrictions of leg restraints, affiant has reason to believe and does believe inmate Armstrong planned to escape from custody. And so if you think about it, it's actually quite clever to say that I've got an injury to my leg. Well, doesn't that mean they're gonna be somewhat more flexible in terms of the leg restraints? And if she's not in leg restraints, then all she's got to deal with are arm restraints. This is the part that gets really quite interesting, is the way that she got free from, I think, the handcuffs. It says, where is it? There it is. Okay, let's look at that. Are you guys able to see that? Probably not. Let's pull it up a bit bigger. Okay, so it says in the paragraph in the middle, it says, during the investigation of the escape, inmate Armstrong's cell was searched by correctional staff and a metal pen and dental floss was recovered from her cell. The metal pin, sorry, that should be pin as well, I think. The metal pin had been broken off, providing a solid, thin metal piece that likely could be used to manipulate a handcuff to be removed. During the investigation of the escape, affiant received information that she'd utilized an injury complaint to restrict the use of leg restraints. There it is. Quite interesting. So you kind of get the sense of someone who's quite enterprising, right, in terms of that. And Kaitlin does turn out to be quite a talented businesswoman. She and her sister made quite a lot of money in the real estate market. And I think that is in part why she can afford such top-notch legal counsel. I don't know if you guys know this, but shortly before Kaitlin went on the lam, Colin Strickland apparently gave her $450,000, right? So we're actually talking about similar sums of money that Suzanne Morphew inherited, right? Similarly large amounts of money. And sometimes money can, lead to desperate behavior. In any event, on screen there, you can see that's Colin Strickland. And he's about 35 years old in that image. and that's Mo Wilson. I think she was about 25 years old, and she had gone to Austin to take part in a race. The race wasn't in Austin, but it was near Austin, and then on the day of the murder, which is May 11th, 2022, I think, was it 2022 or 2021? 2022. There's this allegation that somebody saw the two of them together and then reacted, right? And a kind of interesting question here is, how did, so almost similar to the Idaho students case, how did, what was the connection between the killer and the victim? Remember in the Idaho students case, they've tried to argue that there's some social media activity connecting them. Can you guys remember the alleged social media activity in this case? How did Kaitlin Armstrong know, without her boyfriend telling her, that Mo was in town? How did she know? How could she have guessed? Anybody remember that? Okay, so there we go, Strava. There we go. So it's being alleged, and that's another thing that is somewhat different with athletes. So if you're talking about, I don't want to say conventional victims, but let's just say non-athletic folks in true crime, you would tend to go to the usual social media, Instagram, and of course Colin Strickland and Mo Wilson and Kaitlin Armstrong were active on Instagram. But what is idiosyncratic to some extent is that they were also on Strava. And what does Strava tell you that Instagram doesn't? Well, maps. It shows you maps of people's exercise activities, to some extent their patterns, to some extent who they are training with. But it can be giving away a certain amount of private information. And so if Mo Wilson put up a cycling, a cycle or a swim that she did in Austin, it would be telling somebody, I'm in Austin, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so Strava is not only a biking app. You can use it for swimming. You can use it for so many things: swimming, hiking, stand-up paddling, kayaking, many activities. Obviously, running and jogging, all that kind of thing. And obviously, there's a little bit of a overlap. There's a little bit of Strava but like a tiny amount in the Nicola Bully case. And there's a tiny amount of Strava in Koberger's social media, but of course it plays a much bigger role with sort of these sorts of athletes. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm not going to go any further in terms of this article. I do want to look at just quickly a review of the case, and then we'll go through some more of the playlist that I've set up, and some of these really incredible articles. You should read them if you haven't already. This is in Outside magazine. Outside tends to profile, really inspiring sort of athletic characters, mountain climbers, adventure folk, and sports folk. If you haven't read this article, it's really worth reading. If you guys want me to, I can maybe review some of it. This article deals with weapons handling and to some extent goes down a slightly political path, saying, because Colin Strickland bought the firearms for himself and apparently for Kaitlin Armstrong, and how how should one feel about that? Is it his fault? Is it the fault of gun laws? So somebody went down that route, which I don't particularly find that relevant. It is interesting, but it may be worth mentioning. And then there's the picture that you see behind me. It's from this article in Bicycling, The Truth and Tragedy of Mariah Wilson. Let's just pull that up quickly. For a few short electric years, she took gravel racing by storm. Then she was gone forever. And I think part of why this story means something to me is I lost a friend who was quite a force in cycling as well. And so, I can kind of acknowledge that I'm probably, in a way, voyeuristically dealing with this case. In other words, when I'm thinking about justice for Mo Wilson, I guess in a way I'm thinking about it for a friend of mine, a cyclist who lost his life while he was actually cycling, right? Sherry Davis says, what prompted Colin to purchase the firearms? Can anyone answer that question? Anyone answer that? The first of all, we know when the firearms were bought. They were bought in for over the Christmas period of about 2020. We know this was sort of during the COVID period when there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of paralysis, right? Stephanie says Kaitlin had a confrontation and felt unsafe. There was apparently a confrontation in a parking lot, but that's of course assuming the story that was told is true. No, they didn't have a break-in. Yeah, she told Colin she had one. Okay. Kaitlin said she was scared. Okay, so let's quickly deal with a very quick review, and we're going just to very generic information. We will go to my playlist in a moment. But again, if you're hearing rumbling noises, it's because of a thunderstorm outside. We're getting some much needed rain. By the way, is there anyone here that is from France watching? Anyone watching from France? We had a really incredible rugby game, the quarter-final game, Springboks against France. It was a nail-biter, one of the most exciting games I've ever seen. I was watching it with some friends of mine, and we were all like out of our seats shouting at the TV, and yeah, definitely pretty nail-biting. In the end, we won by 1 point, 29-28. So I don't know if Bria is watching. Bria is from France. I'm not sure if you were watching that game. Anyway, let's move on. So here's a kind of a summary of the case. It was on the night of May 11, 2022. It wasn't like the middle of the night. It wasn't really that late. In fact, the CCTV footage from a ring camera, it's quite bright. It's certainly not. It's not in the middle of the night. It's fairly early in the evening, I would say. I wouldn't say on the night of. I would say in the early evening or something like that. Police charged Kaitlin Marie Armstrong with that and killing Wilson in the belief that the murder was the result of romantic jealousy ignited by Wilson's casual encounter with her boyfriend. Now, one of the stories that I can't help associating with this case is Kill Bill. And Kill Bill, just very quickly, the story arc of Kill Bill is a woman is pregnant. Spoiler alert, by the way. A woman is pregnant, and then she decides to leave her partner who's perhaps not the best influence, and she marries somebody else. He then finds out about this. It's actually his child. He finds out about this, and he's obviously jealous. And so he kills her. And I think they call it the massacre at El Paso or something like that. Anyway, in terms of the story, he kills her out of jealousy. But then why does she, how does she respond after that? Well, it's out of not jealousy, but revenge. And so what is going on in this story? Is it more jealousy or more revenge, or is it something else? I think you've got to be careful saying either. I think if you say it's revenge, well, then revenge for what? Like, what did Mo really do wrong? If you say jealousy, then I think you've also got to qualify that. I mean, were they even in a relationship? And is it how long was Colin cheating on Kaitlin if it was jealousy? So is it definitely jealousy? And I think there's a point where jealousy can turn into revenge. In other words, you can be jealous of someone, and then maybe you warn that person. You say, "Stay away from my partner." But then if you see that something has happened, can you see how that can then go over the thing to revenge? Does that make sense? Do you guys think it's a silly distinction to make, to say obviously it's jealousy, it's not revenge? I'm just trying to say that revenge can be an extremely potent crime, as you see in Kill Bill, where the amount of violence can be huge, right? But then you've got to also say revenge for what? And that is what I think makes this case potentially quite interesting. Because you must bear in mind, you can say jealousy because someone is attracting the attention of my partner, right? And that's fair. Jealousy is definitely a factor here. But bear in mind, we're dealing with another woman who was like 9 or 10 years younger, and almost like the perfect partner on paper for Colin Strickland. He's a world-class gravel rider, and she's also a world-class gravel rider. And so she's fitter, stronger, faster, and younger than Kaitlin. So can you see why there is some substance to the revenge angle? Does that make sense? So I can understand if you say it seems more obviously jealousy, but if you don't know this case very well, then I think it's a little bit different. But it's, you can certainly not say that jealousy is not relevant, I guess. Okay, so Deborah says, now I do remember hearing about this case. Okay, so let's do a quick review here. Armstrong had spent 43 days at large prior to a capture in Costa Rica, where authorities said she had been trying to set up a new life. So that's the that's the really tragic side to the story, was that you had something, whether it was them sharing a burger or sharing a swim in a pool in Austin, but you had an encounter between these two young fit individuals, and then the next thing, all three lives were destroyed. Obviously Mo Wilson's life permanently destroyed. I think she was shot 3 times point blank. Her partner's life was also destroyed. You know, he just basically never cycled again. He lost a lot of his sponsors, but his life changed like that. And then his girlfriend's life also changed instantly. So, you know, you have this weird thing where one person dies, but 3 people's lives are destroyed just like that. Pretty incredible. What does Mo Roma say? Howdy from Texas. Good to have you here. Okay. So a little bit about Mo. She was born in Littleton, New Hampshire, the daughter of Eric and Karen Wilson, and the sister of Matthew Wilson. She grew up in Kirby, Vermont. So she wasn't from that area. She's also no slouch. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Engineering. So she was first thinking of being an engineer and then developed this passion for cycling. Why? Because she was raised in a family of athletes. And if you think about Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland, they were a athletic couple, no doubt about it. She was also a nationally ranked junior skier, so a very talented young woman. And then she became a gravel cyclist. Then she became a professional cyclist full time. And before that, she'd worked as a demand planner, right? There you can see what that is for Specialized. That's a bicycle manufacturer. Okay, now let's deal with the accused. Kaitlin Armstrong, she was born in 1987, right? So she was about 11 years older than, let's look at my maths. Is it, that's 9, but yeah, but 9 years older than Mariah, about a 9-year age gap. She grew up in Michigan. She graduated from Stevenson High School in 2005. And that's what she did for a living, yoga teacher and licensed realtor. Now, just looking at this, any idea how she met Colin Strickland? Just looking at what she did for a living, how do you think they met? Well, the answer is, I think it was during, actually, don't think it was that, because they've been in a relationship for a while. But he went to yoga classes with Kaitlin and her sister. Armstrong was in a relationship with Colin Strickland. He's also a professional cyclist. And this is really important in terms of the dynamics of this relationship. Again, if you say it's only about jealousy, what happens if you in a relationship and for whatever reason, someone comes into the picture, now you're not in that relationship anymore, but let's say you've been building a life with that person. You've been investing your time, you've been doing things together, you've been committing some of your resources, your savings, with this person, and you've spent large pieces of your life going on holiday with the person, whatever, and then the next thing you're not together, right? And then you somehow manage to get the relationship going again, right? That's why I'm talking about revenge, not necessarily just jealousy. Jealousy is, I would say, at that level, and certainly this is just a subjective argument. You could say, I don't agree with that. It's just a particular view that jealousy is at a certain level, potentially on the anger and the whatever spectrum. Revenge, like you see in Kill Bill, can be at like the nth degree where you just see red, right? I do think if that didn't happen, if they didn't separate in the fall of 2021, then I don't know whether this crime would have happened, but that separation made it look like she was walking a tightrope, I think, with Colin Strickland, that this relationship that she thought was so secure, she suddenly realized potentially wasn't all that secure. And so there's Colin Strickland. I'm not sure whether he ever has admitted having a brief romantic relationship with Mo. I can't remember whether I think he said we were friends or something like that. But the important thing is what Kaitlin Armstrong thought. Do you think Kaitlin Armstrong, having contributed so much to this relationship, believing that she's going to get married, probably, believing that they're going to have children together, probably, believing that this is my soulmate, this is my partner, right? How does it feel when someone just maybe throws that away? And so that's why I said it goes beyond just jealousy. It's something more aggravating than that. Thanks very much, Alf. By the way, I always see your comments in the comments, and I tend to always appreciate them. So thanks very much. Alina says, jealousy or revenge, there's something quite wrong with a killer. Now, Alina, that's an interesting comment to make, but I think if you get to know the person and you get to know how hard this person's worked, then you may or may not reach the point where you actually kind of feel sorry for the potential perpetrator, where you feel like, you know what, I've been through that. I've worked really hard on a relationship. I've given so much to a relationship. And that feeling you get when it's lost is unbearable. You know, you might feel feelings of depression or despair or like terrible, terrible heartache, terrible, terrible anguish. Or you may feel bristling anger and resentment, like this just isn't fair. I haven't worked this hard for someone just to come along and steal what I've, and of course, all's fair in love and war. You can't say, you know, you can't put a relationship on trial and say, you know what, this is what I deserved. In a divorce law to some extent, but I think you all know that feeling. And I'm someone who, you know, I was in a relationship where I certainly felt like that, where I certainly felt hard done by, and I also felt like I'd made huge sacrifices. And you know, you can either let that anger and bitterness and the horror of that whole experience, you can either let that consume you and sort of, you know, it's like you add insult to injury, because by the length of time you mourn about it and whine about it and can't let go, you lose additional time, and that's on you, right? But I certainly understand that feeling of like unbearable anguish, like this just is not right. It's just not fair to me what has happened here. But life's not fair, right? Life isn't fair. And the sooner you can kind of get over that, and I'm not saying it's simple or easy, but the sooner you can move on to the next meaningful experience. Otherwise, you just add, you make this thing that is already a burden and already a dark chapter in your life, you make it additional pages long when it doesn't need to be, right? What are you guys saying? So what I'm trying to say is one can sympathize with the circumstances that Kaitlin was in, and you can really get a sense of what she's been through by how hard she worked to raise herself out of her circumstances. You know, I think she was in a somewhat dysfunctional family, you know, where one parent, I can't remember the details, but one parent had this, and I think she's got a brother that she needed to help. I can't quite remember the details, but she certainly worked really hard, made a success of her life, and not only that, worked hard to try and keep up with Colin. Like she wasn't a professional athlete, but she'd try and keep up with him. She would try and train with him and that sort of thing. And then you have a situation where, well, he's a top athlete. Is he going to want to train with his fit but not necessarily good enough girlfriend, or with another sort of world-class athlete? Can you see how that's going to feel very disempowering, right? It's going to feel very disempowering. I can also tell you, as a YouTuber, that's not even how I think of myself, but as someone who's written so many books, right? You've worked so hard for so long. You've written so many books, and then someone comes along who's younger than you, and seems to just effortlessly surpass you. And are you supposed to not have some kind of emotional reaction over that? And then when you do, you see that there's someone, even, how can I put it? There are channels out there where no one's written any books. And there's a guy who wears sort of makeup, and he's killing it in true crime. And you think, what is all my effort worth? All my painstaking, conscientious, diligent effort, all of those sleepless nights, all of that blood, sweat, and tears, what is it really worth? And unfortunately, if you go down that road, if you kind of compare yourself unfavorably to people, and you kind of, what's the word, you kind of not assume, but suggest that everyone's circumstances are the same, then you're going to be very unhappy, and you've simply got to kind of laugh it off. You've got to concentrate on your field of influence. But all I'm trying to say is I can understand Kaitlin's frustration. I can definitely understand it. You work so hard, and it seems like someone simply surfing on the coattails of youth and talent sort of kind of what's the word, floats in, sweeps in, and then takes everything away that you work so hard for. It is maddening. It is maddening, but it does happen in life. It does happen in life. Okay, what is? And yeah, you have to find the humor in it. Yeah, is Jean Karras here? Kat Kruger, good to see you. By the way, if you're hearing snorting sounds, it's my schnauzer sleeping, snoring into my arm. Anyway, and so that's like one dimension of the story. The other dimension is Mo Wilson. I've obviously got probably the most sympathy for her. All of us have at some point or another flirted with someone or shown an interest in someone that we like, and you don't expect to die as a result of that. I mean, it's almost a repeat of the Chris Watts case. If you, Nicole Kessinger, and I know a lot of you don't have any sympathy for Nicole Kessinger, but if you have an affair with someone, you don't expect that to destroy your life. And I mean, in Mo Wilson's case, it wasn't even an affair. Colin and Kaitlin weren't married, and it was a very serious relationship, but it wasn't a marriage. And you don't expect to lose your life over something like that, right? And it's not just a life, it's someone who had built herself up as well. She was 25 years old, she had the world in front of her, and then that got snatched away in a very cruel and unexpected way. No matter who committed this crime, what happened to Mo was very cruel twist of fate. Do you agree? And then Colin Strickland, that's kind of a more complicated story, but you can also say, by the same token, I had a fling with someone. I went through a period where I wasn't sure of my feelings, and then do you deserve to have your life and your achievements just thrown away? Then you have some sports people who have a very very impressive lifespan and trajectory. Think about Roger Federer. Think about certain cyclists. That they have this long storied history, and then they retire when it suits them. Now, can you imagine having to retire because of something that, for the lack of a better word, is extremely bad luck, right? Okay, so someone else says, I'm not familiar with the case. let's deal a little bit more with what it's about. On May 11, 2022, Wilson was found dead with multiple gunshot wounds shortly after 10 p.m. Now, I don't think the crime happened shortly after 10 p.m., and that's a really important question, as when did the crime actually take place? Why is it an important question? Because it deals with the matter of Kaitlin's alibi. Where was Kaitlin when Mo died? So that is where she was going to take part in a race in this place in Texas. How do you pronounce it? Is it Hico or Hico? Hours before her death, she had gone out with Strickland for a swim at Deep Eddy Pool and afterward ate dinner. So do you remember I've said some of the most important tools in the TCRS toolbox are identity and timeline. And I purposely put those first and second. And so if you look at this, is the timeline here relevant? Is it relevant that just before she died, she went out with Strickland for a swim and then had dinner, right? Is it relevant that is what she did just before she died relevant to her death? That's the question. That's the question. And it's also the question is whether it can be proved. So if you think about the Barry Morphew case, Suzanne Morphew case, and you say, to what extent were the circumstances in that case, infidelity, financial, let's just call it the financial situation, to what extent were those things factors in that case, right? And then you look at this case and you say, to what extent were finances and infidelity factors in this case? And you can only really answer that if you know the fabric of the case, but also if you know the people that you're dealing with. Are we dealing with someone who's short-tempered? Are we dealing with someone who is ambitious? Are we dealing with someone who's insecure? And those exact same questions that we ask in this case, we will also ask in the Barry Morphew case and the Chris Watts case and so on. It says here, Strickland denied ever going inside Wilson's house after dropping Wilson off and was ruled out as a prime suspect following a police investigation. Obviously, him denying going inside is a way of saying, you know, what we were doing wasn't serious infidelity, right? But again, the bottom line isn't what he says or what anyone else says. It's what did the perpetrator think happened there? If he went to Wilson's house, what did she think happened? And even if nothing did happen, did she think something was going to happen? An autopsy ruled, okay, let's just do this. An autopsy ruled Wilson's death a homicide. She had 2 gunshot wounds, one in the head and in the chest, that allegedly occurred after she was already lying supine in the floor. So do you know what that is saying? Right? That is saying that she was shot and then shot again, right? Similar to, I think, the way Charles Vallow was shot. Police named Armstrong a person of interest after video surveillance showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee arriving to the Austin residence moments before the killing. So if they're saying moments before the killing, then whenever the Cherokee went there, to me it looks like it's shortly after sunset. So I would say, what is it? Just do a quick Google search. What time does the sun set in Austin on May the 11th? The answer is 8:15. 8:15. So I've got an idea this happened around about 9 o'clock at night. And the fact that, I don't know if you guys remember this, the fact that there were several gunshot wounds, you would expect neighbors would have heard bang, 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 right? But I'm not sure they did. I'm not sure if neighbors did hear gunshots. We know in the Letitia Stork case, there was a gunshot, but no one heard anything, as far as I can remember. In this case, I think they were wondering whether a silencer was used. That was certainly part of the narrative at one point. Then she was taken into custody over an outstanding misdemeanor warrant for theft. And Armstrong made no statement to the police when confronted about the video evidence of her vehicle. Investigators said that she turned her head and rolled her eyes in an angry manner. So that's already showing a certain amount of emotions, right? So this is a picture of her being interrogated. And you can see how her appearance has changed. Look at how she looks over there. She's fairly tanned. Her hair actually looks kind of a blonde color rather than ginger, and certainly not brunette. And then let's compare that to, what else do I have here? To this. And you kind of get an idea that her hair is her treasure. What's that saying? Her hair is quite important to her. Even when she changed her appearance here, she still kept her hair relatively long. But look at the three versions of her. Yeah, she's got blonde hair. Yeah, she's got kind of a carrot-colored hair. And yeah, it's kind of brunette. Right? Okay. Shall we go back to where we were? She turned her head and rolled her eyes when questioned about how Wilson was with Strickland. She was released on a technicality, we mentioned that earlier, stemming from discrepancies between her date of birth in the police department's database and the one in the warrant. That is how strict the protocols are for law enforcement. You know, you've got to be accurate in the person that you're arresting. Otherwise, you can be in trouble. Police examined Wilson's phone and they concluded that she was romantically tied to Strickland while she was still dating Armstrong. So you kind of get the idea that I don't know this for a fact, but you kind of get the idea that Kaitlin doesn't tell the police Mo was having a relationship with her boyfriend, right? She doesn't inform them of that. And do you think Colin does either? Do you think Colin says, oh yeah, Mo, we were having a relationship? So how do they find out? And bear in mind, probably like Suzanne Morphew and Jeff Libler, it's a secret relationship, right? It's not an affair, but it's a dalliance, right? And so so how do they find out about this? Well, they go to her phone, and it's one of the rare cases, I think, where the victim's phone is readily retrievable. You know, there's so many cases now where you never find the victim's phone. Strickland originally denied knowing the victim. Can you believe it? He actually denied even knowing Mo Wilson when first interviewed, but then he eventually admitted to the relationship and to keeping communication with Wilson hidden from Armstrong. And this is where the story kind of achieves kind of another layer, is where you might say, whoever killed Mo is guilty of a crime. Okay, right. We've established that. But wasn't somebody else who was in the relationship duty bound to warn her or to protect her or to, how can I put it? Doesn't he have some responsibility? And you might say, well, legally, he doesn't have any responsibility, and I'd probably agree with you. But then the question is, ethically, is there any moral responsibility? And you might say, when you have a love triangle, there's no moral responsibility, blah, 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 right? But this is a situation where you know someone really well and you bought them a handgun. I think that's what he did. And you're aware of who they are and what they like. And can't you anticipate their behavior? And if you can, bear in mind this is a sports person, somebody who uses strategy to, on the sports, in the sports arena, right? In other words, you've got to try and outwit, and you've got to try and know your enemy, if that's the word, right? And so doesn't he bear any responsibility for, to some extent, warning Mo about what she's kind of getting into? By the same token, I suppose you could say Mo is 25 years old. She's a grown woman, and she made a grown-up woman choice, right? But Mo is very close to the age that Gabby Petito was. I think in a lot of ways more mature, but I think in the romantic sense, maybe not that mature. But yes, she's with quite a much older guy, a guy who's about 10 years older than her. Doesn't he have any obligation to kind of warn her, about who she could potentially be dealing with, right? And then even if you make that case, I suppose you could say, but who would ever imagine that it could end in this way? And of course, we don't know exactly how it did end. But I mean, in a scenario where someone was upset because someone cheated, do you expect someone to pick up a weapon, right? Do you expect like a scenario like that to play out? Most people don't. Says here, Colin Strickland went so far as to delete text messages from Wilson on his phone while saving her phone number under a pseudonym. And I think that is how he kept the relationship secret from Kaitlin, right? Armstrong reportedly became aware of the relationship and expressed a strong desire to kill Wilson. Now, this is where, to me, it becomes kind of disturbing. If Armstrong has actually said, and it's kind of a big if, I mean, can you prove it? Are there witnesses that heard this? But let's say, for the sake of argument, that she has said, I'm going to kill her, something like that, then isn't it really reckless to then pursue the relationship regardless? And I suppose you could play devil's advocate to an extent and say, you know what, when they met up, perhaps they'd resigned themselves to not being in a relationship and they just met up for kind of old time's sake. It's not romantic. They are not going to rekindle anything. They just like each other and they want to spend a little bit of time with each other. But I think that's a bit naive if you say we're going to go swimming together kind of at night, and then after swimming together, we're going to have dinner together. Like, in what universe is that not kind of a romantic scenario, right? So, if you have a scenario where, and as I say, this is alleged, we don't know if it's definitely true, but Kaitlin apparently was aware of the relationship. She'd said something about killing Wilson, and then not long after that, she's actually kind of given a firearm. I'm actually not sure if it was after that or like at that time, but on the one hand, you expressing that sentiment, and the next thing you have a firearm. Strickland revealed he had bought 2 handguns for Armstrong and himself. Through a search warrant, police recovered 2 firearms from the house Strickland shared with Armstrong. A spent shell casing from one weapon, a 6-hour P365 handgun belonging to Armstrong, yielded a significant match with the one found at the crime scene. Now, you might say, well, this is quite a straightforward case, right? But Kaitlin's defense attorney has basically said, you can't say that they are matched. That's pseudoscience. There's no such, you can't, there's no definitive way of matching the ballistics of a shell casing to a handgun. In other words, you can say it seems to be a match in the same way you can say handwriting seems to be a match, but you can never make it a statement of scientific fact. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with that. I'm not sure. I guess one's got to look at, I think the best way to do that is look at the idiosyncratic markings on the casing that was found, and then look at the idiosyncratic markings on any other casing from that weapon, and then compare it to idiosyncratic markings on another weapon, and then you'll get a sense of it, right? The point is her lawyer hasn't accepted that. So in other words, it's I think a lot of the case turns on this particular hinge, on whether the jury are going to accept that the shell casing at the scene belongs to Kaitlin Armstrong's gun, right? I think this is fairly strong evidence, but I think even without this, if you can provide the fabric in enough detail, then you might be able to come up with quite a strong circumstantial case. But the vehicle moving by the house, defense attorneys also said, okay, so it's a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm sure there are many in Austin. Okay, well, it's got a bicycle rack on the back. Well, Austin's a big bicycling community. Maybe there's more than one black Jeep Grand Cherokee with a bicycle rack at the back. And then he says, and this has got a bearing to some extent on the Koberger case, can you see the number plate? Because that would be a definitive way of positively identifying. And the answer is no. Can you see through the glass who is driving that vehicle? And the answer is no. And then you say, although it seems quite likely, can you say definitely blah, blah, blah? And that's where it is a little bit of a trickier case than you might think. The other thing that, and we saw how well this has been done, I don't know if well is the right word, skillfully this has been done in the Morphew case. You can undo a police investigation simply by undermining protocol and police procedures. And so if you say she was interrogated under duress, which is one argument they have had, that she was arrested with the wrong numbers, and that just shows the police were amateurs or whatever it is. How long was the one police officer in his position? You're having these exact same arguments in all these cases. Suzanne Morphew, Idaho students, and this case, which is you undermine the police, you undermine the prosecution's case, not by arguing the facts, but by discrediting the prosecution, by discrediting the police. And we are now living in a time where there's quite a ripe field for that kind of discussion. You might have a juror sitting there saying, no, I don't trust them or whatever. And then liking the defense case for making that argument when it doesn't necessarily have too much to do with the merits of the case. Can you see how this can actually become a tougher case to win than you might think? Melsa says ballistics is a science, not hocus pocus. I tend to think that ballistics is somewhat scientific, but you're still dealing with markings. So I would say it's more scientific than handwriting analysis, but it's not, it isn't absolutely scientific. Okay, let's continue. The search warrant also revealed that Armstrong had visited a shooting range with his sister to learn how to use a firearm. On May 17th, an arrest warrant for first-degree murder was issued for Kaitlin Armstrong. Right, so that was May 17. Well, she spent 43 days at large. She was apprehended by U.S. Marshals in a hostel in Santa Teresa. Now, don't laugh, but I'm actually planning on going to Santa Teresa sometime in November, and I'm not going there to this isn't like Sherlock Holmes. I'm trying to solve the case. I'm simply curious. I'm simply interested in the journey that she took. I'm going to be in Texas also sometime in November, and as I say, I'm interested in the story. It's touched me in different ways, and so I'm kind of interested in getting to know the fabric of this case personally and directly. It's not really about, I mean, there's not really a financial incentive involved. It's going to cost a lot of money to fly from South Africa to New York, to Texas, to Costa Rica. So it's really not that's not part of the equation. It's more really about, I kind of want to have a more authentic view of this case than behind my computer screen. I kind of want to get a sense of what is going on, but by going to the bicycle shops where she went, and perhaps cycling on some of the routes, certainly not the whole one, but and just kind of getting a sense of the dust and the sky and the scope of this case. This is a story where three people were on the cusp of having a fairy tale. I think that is expressing my interest in it the best way. You have three people who are each in their own right successful in their lives. They've come a long way, and they are quite young, and they're quite beautiful, and they're quite well loved by the people around them. They've got quite a big fan base and friends and supporters. And then just like that, the fairy tale's over, and the fairy tale becomes a nightmare. All the beautiful things just are lost. And that is a great tragedy. Any life lost is a tragedy, but a young life where someone has achieved something, worked hard, and come somewhere, and to lose it in the circumstances we're talking about, where someone has just fallen in love with someone, or expressing feelings of affection, you wouldn't expect things to end in this way, right? You asked about the second escape attempt. I've already mentioned that was premeditated. I think a question worth asking is, would she have escaped if she thought she had a strong case? And also, how will this escape attempt affect her case? And I think the inevitable answer is negatively. I think it's going to be very hard to find, and I mean the jury's already been chosen, but how can a jury not be aware of what's just happened? And how can they not have thoughts about what has just happened? Thanks a lot, Sherry Davis. Thank you. But the one thing that is interesting about the second escape attempt is you see how meticulously it was planned, that she exercised for months. She plotted this for a long period of time and then executed it and executed it like a star. I mean, she got out, she was running, she was escaping, and she managed 10 minutes. But it shows someone who can dream and plan and have this sort of inner world going on, right? And I think if you imagine the thinking and feeling that went into the second escape attempt, imagine that same thing, that same process going on inside, where she was instead of in jail awaiting trial, she was in a prison of a relationship awaiting somebody cheating on her, right? Like thinking that the writing could be on the wall, hoping that it's not going to be on the wall, but also being really vigilant. Was that taking place? Okay. The other thing that's quite interesting is that Kaitlin Armstrong seemed to have the support of her sister. Maybe she took her sister's passport without her sister's knowledge. But it would be fascinating to know what her sister thinks about all of this. Because that's one person we haven't heard from. And will we hear from Caitlin's sister during the trial? Will she testify in support of her sister? U.S. Marshals said that she had fled to Costa Rica using a passport that did not belong to her, but belonged to somebody who was closely associated with her, as well as significantly changed her appearance and sought opportunities to teach yoga under a variety of aliases. This is once again where you see the power of identity, even in another place, right? Even in Costa Rica, even with a different name, even with a different appearance, she's still who she is. She's a yoga teacher, right? Her identity doesn't change ultimately. They observed that her hair had been dyed and cut short and her nose bandaged, and saw some discoloration around her eyes. So it's also possible that she had some kind of surgery around her eyes. Who knows? She said that it was a surfing accident and that's why she had those injuries. So and this is part of the really strange intrigue with this case is she says, no, I didn't have plastic surgery. I was in a surfboard accident. And then there's a slip of paper, I think, in her locker that seems to be a receipt for surgery, but there's no name on it, or it's not her name. And so again, is her defense lawyer going to say, well, you can't prove that she had plastic surgery, right? And then probably the prosecution will show I hope they do, like a big poster of Kaitlin, basically this picture. Does it look like she's had surgery? And to me, those eyebrows do look slightly different. Her eyes do look slightly different. Of course, in the one she's smiling, in the other she's not. But anyway, the defense case is that can you prove that she's had plastic surgery? It's almost the same kind of argument. Can you prove that the casing came from the Sig Sauer? I know it looks like it, but can you prove it? Okay, let's go on. Armstrong was arraigned on July 21, 2022, pleading not guilty. As of May 2023, she's being held on a $3.5 million bond in Travis County Jail. I seem to remember she was offered a plea deal. Let me see if I can find that. Kaitlin. Good memory, right? Former yoga teacher rejected the deal by Travis County District Attorney. The leniency offered by Garza was extended to Armstrong well before her attempt to escape from correctional officers Wednesday. Let's just have a quick look at that. So, according to the deal, she could have been released from prison in her 50s or 60s. In other words, she might get a 20-year sentence or a 15-year sentence, which is a heck of a lot sooner than if she's convicted by a jury and gets life in prison. So I do wonder, if I get to Texas, they could potentially delay this trial. The trial's supposed to start October 30th, and I wonder whether her escaping from custody may lead them to change the date of the trial. I hope not. So far, there's no news of that, but I guess we'll see. What's also interesting here is, against the advice of her attorney, she rejected the plea deal. She's insisting on trying that case. And so if you think about it, did she really believe her chances were so good if she made this second escape attempt? And I think there's another possibility is maybe now, could she be in a position to accept the plea deal now that all the chips are off the table, kind of thing? Or did that plea deal have a kind of a sell by date, a kind of because they often do. You can accept it up to a certain point. Anyway, we'll see. So the plea deal seemed to say plead guilty and get 15 years, and now we're going to see what happens instead. But you do seem to be dealing. We do seem to be dealing with a very determined woman here in Kaitlin Armstrong. If you look at her eyes, she seems to have quite a steel will, and maybe that's what she saw in Colin Strickland. She saw a man who matched the determination she felt as a woman, as a heterosexual woman, right? Okay, what else? That is basically it. Armstrong had lost her bid to suppress evidence in a custodial interrogation. So I don't know if you know what that's about. What they tried to achieve there was they tried to say that she wasn't properly Mirandized, and so when she did speak during an interrogation, in other words, when she made a police statement, that when she made a police statement during her first custodial interrogation, that should not be admissible. And she's apparently lost that, in terms of that motion, she's lost. And I think that's probably one of the strongest parts of the case against her, because it deals with what she said in one version, and possibly there's another version, either Colin Strickland's version or her own version, that perhaps differs from that particular version. So I guess we'll see. But I do think her custodial interrogation, first of all, doesn't reflect terribly well on her. You have her rolling her eyes and that sort of thing. But I also think it was inevitable that her lawyer would try to attack the credibility of the way that she was taken into custody. Okay, so that's where you are now. So we're not really going to deal with this article, but it's a really long article in Outside Magazine. The Murder of Mariah Wilson was published in March of this year. Just a quick reference to it. How did one of the best young racers in the country wind up dead in an Austin apartment? And that is, in a way, also kind of the mystery of the story. Like, when you look at Mo, she seems like a very positive, optimistic, likable, kind, friendly, genuine, good person. How does she end up dead on a friend's kitchen floor? Or was it bathroom floor? How did that happen? And the answer is, well, there's a long story behind it. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph here, and then we'll go on to the next one. Colin Strickland believed that every woman should own a gun. It was a feminist conviction of a sort. He would argue that as a dude, he enjoyed a freedom that many women don't. He could go most places and do most things without feeling threatened. He rode his bike on desolate gravel roads and parked his truck wherever he liked and stepped inside a Spartan trailer that he hauled behind him. Now, I must say, when you look at the social media, the Instagram, Colin Strickland's Instagram, Mo Wilson's Instagram, you really get an idea that they were really living this really colorful, vivid, incredibly, what's the word, special life. You know, they were living a fairy tale. Separately, I mean, Colin Strickland, on his own right, was having this incredible life. His life had taken off unexpectedly. And Mo Wilson's life was also going really well. And so that is what makes this tragedy so tragic. Anyway, if you want to read the whole article, I'll put that in chat. Yeah, adventurous. They just seem to be having a lot of fun and living life. You know, I know when I wrote for GQ magazine, they would introduce me as a GQ writer as, what did they say? A former, I think they said former professional triathlete. And I was never a professional triathlete, but I was for a long time a full-time triathlete, and I was competing at a fairly high level. But I was never really sponsored. I got state colors and sometimes performed at a, I won't say world-class level, but at a high level. And it's a dream of a lot of sporting kids to live the lives that they were living, you know, to be making a living from sport, right? And that's really not easy. You know, if you think Gabby and Brian's van life adventure was tough, I think this is a million times tougher, because you've got to do the blood, sweat, and tears and keep your sponsors happy. And it was in the middle of COVID as well. So that area of challenge just shows just how hard they were working, just the amount of work ethic that went into this fairy tale. And again, makes the reason for what happened so sad, so unfortunate. Madeline, I hope we see you again. Yeah. Very high competitive level. Yeah. Sharon says Kaitlin Armstrong used the name Beth Martin in Costa Rica. Yeah. Okay. So I personally, I don't like the tangent this article is taking, but it does have quite a lot of you know, it's a really long article, so, and there are sections of it that are worth reading. I just want to read this part. Just do that. Strickland's girlfriend called him one night in the summer of 2020, sobbing and panicked. A belligerent man, maybe intoxicated, kept banging on the door of her Austin, Texas apartment. The guy eventually went away, but the incident terrified her. Another time, she was accosted by an angry man in a grocery store parking lot. Now and then, creeps followed her while she rode on bike paths and made her feel unsafe, right? And so that's why he bought her a gun. And bear in mind, this is Texas. It's sort of lower down. It's close to the southern border. Strickland could only imagine how these incidents felt to Armstrong. He knew that men commit nearly 80% of violent crime in the US. And he said, why should a woman spend her life living in fear? Maybe a gun would make Kaitlin feel empowered, more independent, free to live the way she chose. Anyway, I'm not going to go further than that into that. Then there's this article in Bicycling. Let's see if we can open up this video. There's a video of Mariah Wilson from August 1st, 2021 at Rooted, Vermont, the only race where her family got to watch her compete professionally. It's 6 seconds long, taken through a car window. Mariah charges across a forested hillside from right to left, fast enough that it's hard to make out she's climbing. Her jersey flashes green and white, a blur of gravel beneath her. In the background, an unbroken canopy of maple, birch, and evergreen. A thick blonde braid falls from her helmet like a rope. Mariah's limbs are splayed over the bike frame, legs pumping. As races go, it had been a rocky day. She'd lost her chain, gotten a flat, and nearly missed a turn, falling well behind the leading woman. Now she was battling back toward the front. Each time race vehicles pulled ahead of the pack and waited for it to pass, here came Mariah, overtaking another rider. The video was taken by a woman she'd never met, Kaitlin Cash, and so it goes on. So if you want to read this article, it really is worth reading. I'll put a link to it in chat. If you guys want me to go through sections of it, I can possibly do that at some point. Let's have a look at this short video, assuming it's still up. I don't know. I seem to remember seeing it, but now I don't see it. Anyway, so we can't seem to find it. But anyway, there she is riding. So there it is. So, that's kind of the sights and sounds that she was looking at. I must say that looks a lot like my bike. There's Kaitlin Cash. You can see there's a poetic element to the story. Athletes trying to survive and then being overtaken by, emotions and crime. That's actually Matthew Wilson. I think that must be. So it says here, Matthew Wilson at the Kingdom Trails in Lyndonville, Vermont on September 23rd, 2022, near the spot where his family planted an apple tree in memory of Mariah. And ironically, I didn't know that. I've actually planted an apple tree in my courtyard as well. The temptation to fit the suspect into the frame of Mo's life is a tragedy that compounds the loss. That's Mo Wilson's mother. The Wilson family at Christmas time. You can see they're quite a sporting family. That's Mo Wilson on the right. And, I think you can't help thinking, how could this happen to this person? How could such a horrible thing happen to this person? It just doesn't seem to make sense. How did it happen? She seemed cocooned from the base impulses that define so many of us. She was a thoughtful friend, a paragon of discipline, a great listener. And I think the simple way of answering that, obviously from a true crime perspective, is love is a risk. It's a risk loving a person. And sometimes you literally put your life at risk. You can lose time falling in love with someone. You can lose time trying to get out of that relationship. But you can lose a lot more than that. You can lose money, and you can even lose your life. How many of recent high-profile crimes involve love or love affairs and murder? So think about Suzanne Morphew. Think about Gabby Petito. Think about Laurie Vallow. That's a classic example. But even in cases where it may not be that clear, like Brian Koberger, who's the alleged suspect with the Idaho students, do you think there weren't feelings of love and attraction? Do you think that those weren't a factor? And the point is, we put ourselves at risk. We are vulnerable when we and I mean, obviously in a symbolic way we make ourselves vulnerable when we tell someone how we feel, and when we express ourselves, and when we don't know what someone else's feelings are. But at the same time, we entering the world, and sometimes a world that's got curveballs in it. We don't know what the underlying dynamics are. And, those of you who know me and know my channel, I've kind of said to you that there are around about 10 tools in the toolbox. One of them is dynamics. Dynamics is a very important tool in this case. If you'd known the dynamics that were going on, maybe you would have been a lot more careful. And I'm not saying that you expect to know the dynamics of someone else's relationship, because it's not always that obvious, but it can save you a lot of grief potentially by paying attention to those dynamics, by the perception you've got in terms of outwitting your not your enemy, your rival, the perception and sensitivity you've got in terms of your approach to diet and intuiting what your rival is going to do. One, in terms of sport, what if she'd applied that to this other person, right? She may have felt it's irrelevant. It's up to Colin to decide. And what's the other thing? She may have had a view that whatever will be, will be. If it's meant to be, then we'll be together, and if it's not, then we're not. Well, in terms of this dynamic, that may have been quite a naive way of thinking about it. Okay, so let's continue. I can't help thinking when I look at Mo Wilson, that's Mo over there, that she kind of looks like a younger version of Kaitlin. Kaitlin also has the same style, long hair in a sort of a knotted rope style, and she's just not a world-class gravel biker. Okay, Marlene, good to see you here. What else is there? Are there any more images here? Mo's inner life remained a puzzle to those who knew her best, even to her mother. So, that's a reference to her identity. Who was this person really? She seemed to be the sweet, kind, good person. but wasn't there also like a bad girl? I mean, in terms of someone who wanted to experiment, someone who wanted to take risks in a certain way as well. And so, you know, there's also kind of that mysterious side, I guess. Mo kept this bandana from the Meteor Cafe with her when she traveled. After her death, Mo gave it to Kaitlin Cash. It's quite a nice gesture there. Facing the cruelty of a life cut short, we mourn a hero that their legacy might somehow avenge their death. And that's really kind of, I think, what we're talking about is getting to know their legacy may actually avenge what happened and may actually end up being an inspiration to us where we say, wow, you lived so large, you took such risks. Maybe we need to do more of that. Maybe your legacy can inspire us out of entropy or out of our own passivity or whatever it is. Because bear in mind, we're dealing with incredibly active folk here, people who are outdoors every day, people who are sweating and struggling and literally crossing the landscape. And they are, you know, some of the healthiest people, physically healthiest people in the world, and some of the most motivated people. And what can we learn from them that's different to the things we learn in true crime, right? I don't think you could say it's being on social media too much, or it's you know, it's a totally different thing that we've got to look at. What does it say? The trial remains off in the distance with the Wilsons most of the time. And this is so true. Whatever small measure of closure or justice they can expect, it's still dwarfed by the everyday reality remade by Mariah's absence. And I think that in a way says a little bit about my interest in this case, is because I don't really see, and it's quite unusual for me, I don't really see this case so much about justice. I see this case about how can you find some measure of justice beyond the courtroom. And you might think, geez, I can't believe you are saying this of all people. I don't mean in the court of social media or the court of TikTok, God forbid. I mean in the world, in society, in reality, right? How can you take the injustice of this and find some kind of closure or justice, but not in the court? And I'm saying you do want it in the court. It should start there, but from where does it go there? And you know, I've my own friend that died. You know, there are you know, his wife and friends of his have printed T-shirts and wristbands and held rides in his memory. And I've done the same thing, just on a much smaller scale, just dedicated a little bicycle ride to a friend of mine, where you think about someone else when you're riding. You think about who they were and what they were trying to do, and they can't, and you can. And do you remember in the movie Saving Private Ryan, the captain says to Private Ryan, earn this, right? It's a little bit like that. And then the answer is how? How do we earn this? How do we express that, right? And so when I go to Costa Rica, part of that journey is to ask that question and try and answer it, right? For me, it's quite a personal struggle, because although I've been in sport for a long time, I've done something like 10 or 12 half Ironmans and then an Ironman as well. I don't really get the thrill out of competing that I did. So I've got to also try and find another way that involves sport or being physical, but maybe is not so much about being competitive or at the top of your game, that is going to be meaningful. And maybe it's hiking around the Himalayas, or maybe it's visiting Antarctica. I don't know. Maybe I've got to re-listen to this. And so while I'm on my path in terms of that, it's somewhat a somewhat unusually Team Peachtree pursuit. Maybe you guys will make discoveries on your own journeys as well. Okay. So can you see how they've remembered Mo is by planting an apple tree? And that tree will grow and bear fruit. And in a way, that tree symbolizes Mo, right? And that's in a way that you can get a sense of positive closure in a tragedy, right? By going into the real world and applying your own kind of symbolic construct, right? Positive symbolism. Okay, how far are we? 146. What do you guys say we listen to a few minutes of a couple of videos? I don't really want to go much further than 2 hours. So let's go to the playlist. If we look at this playlist, there are 47 videos. This will be the 48th. Texas woman still on the run. Does Kaitlin Armstrong have an alibi? Kaitlin Armstrong flew to New York. U.S. Marshals release new CCTV photos. I did play you guys the silly mistake that allowed Kaitlin to get away. Then, in a very short time, sponsors dumped Colin Strickland. Was that fair? Was that right to take place? Kaitlin Armstrong, will she come after me? New witness comes forward. Strickland originally acted as though he did not know who Wilson was. What do you guys think about that? Bear in mind also that Kaitlin and Colin are in a relationship, so they must have something in common. They must see eye to eye in some specific area. And so one area that I think is quite interesting is, were they both in denial about certain aspects? Another interesting question is, in terms of the financial narrative, was Colin living, whose house were they living in? Who did it belong to? And how would you feel if you own a house, someone's living in your house, and there's potential infidelity? You own the house though, and there's potential infidelity, and you perhaps sacrificed a lot to buy that house, or to furnish that house, or to make the house a home, right? Would that have any impact on how you feel about what's happening? Okay. Is Kaitlin Armstrong traveling under a fake passport? I think that turned out to be that wasn't false, but the passport aspect was certainly, she wasn't traveling under a fake passport, but certainly she was traveling under someone else's passport. Kaitlin seen at New York campground. Kaitlin Armstrong, what sister's Instagram reveals about the Austin fugitive. Colin says here, I don't feel the need to set the record straight. That was how he was dealing with this. I don't feel the need to say anything about what's happening. Was Kaitlin following Mo and Colin in a Jeep that night? Do you guys want to watch that one? Kaitlin Armstrong's Jeep has been located, and so on and so on. Okay, so if you guys want to get yourself appraised of that, you can go through it. Let's have a look at some of these videos.
What happened during the 86-minute time window on May 11 in Austin, Texas? Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. It's not accurate to say that Mo Wilson was shot at 9:56 p.m. That was when the 911 call was.
So that's the house where she died. As far as I remember, she died in the bathroom. It's either the bathroom or the kitchen, and I think it's behind one of these windows. And then her bicycle was found like just down the road, quite an expensive bicycle as well. And then the question is, how did the killer know where Mo was? And if the killer was Kaitlin, how did Kaitlin know where to find Mo? Did she follow Colin there? How did she know?
That was when the 911 call was made. Kaitlin Cash, Mo's friend, had just returned home and, after finding her friend in distress, tried to perform Mo's friend.
So there you can see, remember I said the CCTV doesn't seem to show it being very late at night. Well, there's kind of two CCTVs. There's one like this one, which seems to be, probably around 8 o'clock at night. I mean, one would have to verify that. But there's additional CCTV from the rear of the vehicle that's definitely at night. And maybe that was 10 or 20 minutes later, who knows?
Had just returned home and, after finding her friend in distress, tried to perform CPR. But it is likely she was shot shortly before.
So there it is. There's another view of the vehicle, and there you can see it looks a lot later at night, doesn't it? Another question that I think the defense might raise is they might say, is this the same vehicle? This one, the one is in daytime, or there's a big difference in the lighting of the one and the other. Is this the same vehicle? And you had that kind of issue coming up in the Patrick Frazee case where the CCTV camera from the neighbor seemed to have similar kind of discrepancies.
Cash arrived home. Mo had sustained 3 bullet wounds from a Sig Sauer handgun fitted with a silencer. Strickland said he dropped Mo off at her friend's home in Maple Avenue at around 8:30 p.m. 7 minutes later, Kaitlin Armstrong's black Jeep was captured driving by the house on CCTV camera. The cops were alerted at 9:56 p.m.
So remember, I was saying this seems to have happened around about 9. Well, there you have confirmation. So it seems to have happened between sunset and 9 o'clock at night. And so the time of the incident was it 8:37 p.m. or was it close to 8:37?
So what happened in the rather large 86-minute window? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a couple of hours at 3 p.m. Central, so don't miss that. Now, according to the affidavit, Kaitlin Cash received a notification at 8:36 p.m. that the door had been unlocked. This narrows the time frame down slightly to 80 minutes. It's unclear whether Mo locked the door after entering, but we do know Kaitlin Armstrong was there or hovering nearby when Colin dropped Mo off. The affidavit notes that Kaitlin's Jeep stopped right outside Cash's home, where Mo was staying, at 8:37 p.m.
So there you can see a bad image of the area close to the crime scene. You can see there's kind of a dark alleyway here. Reminds me a bit of the Ramsey home. The Ramsey home's also got kind of an alleyway. But I must say, of all the footage I've seen of the house where Mo Wilson died, I found it all very poor quality. It's very hard to figure out what you're looking at.
David also stresses that the Jeep stopped opposite the residence 1 minute after Mo entered Cash's residence. And this is an excerpt from the affidavit. Detective Ramirez spoke with the homeowners and they allowed him to review the surveillance video. In the video, Detective Ramirez observed a dark-colored SUV drive past the residence with the surveillance cameras at 8:37 p.m., 1 minute after Wilson entered Cash's residence. According to the locking mechanism, the dark-colored SUV then slowed down, appeared to come to a stop directly next to Cash's residence. The SUV appeared to have a large bicycle rack mounted on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, a luggage rack mounted on the roof, and what appeared to be chrome around the windows. No other vehicles were observed on video surveillance passing by until marked emergency vehicles arrived. Now, it doesn't mention whether Kaitlin herself was seen stepping out of the vehicle on the CCTV footage, or what she was wearing or carrying, but it's hard to imagine she wasn't captured on CCTV. Perhaps if it was dark and she chose her moment when cars weren't coming down the street, and by all accounts no cars were coming down the street for the next hour or more, she could perhaps have slipped inside unseen. We also don't know, is it a motion detector camera or infrared? Essentially, can it see in the dark? But that brings up...
So if you think about, again, just to come back to, is it revenge or jealousy, right? If it's revenge, it's not necessarily directed against Mo, as crazy as that sounds. What I'm trying to say is, if Kaitlin committed this crime, and if the motive is more revenge than jealousy, then is she trying to get, who is she trying to get back? Right? Is it revenge against Mo? And I suppose you could say yes, but it could also be revenge against Colin, because hasn't she also said to Colin, this is what I want, this is what I've given you, this is what I'm expecting, this is what I'm hoping for. Bear in mind, he gives her a gun. That's how much he supposedly cares for her and wants her safety to be protected. But they are kind of in business together. They're partners. They have been for years, right? And if she does commit this crime, isn't she kind of getting a bit of revenge on Colin?
Another mystery. How did Kaitlin get inside? Did Mo forget to lock the door behind her? Also, was Kaitlin driving around with a loaded Sig Sauer and a silencer in the glove compartment? Because it seems like Kaitlin didn't return home to retrieve it. If the incident did occur at close to 8:37 p.m., then it means Mo survived the shooting for over an hour, but was nevertheless unable to call for help. We also know that Mo's bike was removed from the property and hidden 68 feet south of Cash's residence. This indicates the coolheadedness of the assassin. It appears, even if Kaitlin was angry, she had the presence of mind to mislead the investigators by making it look like a botched robbery. This errand to retrieve the bike and hide it down the road may have taken a few minutes and led to her arriving home after Colin. So what we know now raises three questions. Number one, what prior engagement did Kaitlin have in the late afternoon and evening on May 11th that made Colin and Mo comfortable enough to think, when the cat's away, the mice will play? And did Kaitlin leave this engagement early? Number two, how and when did Kaitlin figure out Colin was with Mo that day? At what point was Kaitlin alerted that Colin was or seemed to be cheating on her? Within this question, a few additional questions arise. Did she not have an engagement that day after all? Did she check his phone or emails? Did she check Mo's Strava and then head to Cash's home on a whim, only to spy her boyfriend dropping Mo off? In other words, almost by coincidence. Did she follow the couple? If so, how long had she been watching them? So the real question is, was she following them? And if so, for how long had she been following them? We do know that she was following them on social media, including Instagram. Kaitlin Armstrong was following Mo on Instagram and also monitoring Colin Strickland's phone. And so does that not translate into real world following as well? That brings us to the third and final question. Did Colin Strickland not realize at some point that night that Kaitlin was following them? Because his exit from Maple Avenue, rather than returning straight home, he heads north. In other words, in the opposite direction to home. He goes through an alleyway before turning around and going south. Wasn't that because he thought he saw the Jeep? With its idiosyncratic bicycle rack, it would be easy enough to identify. Also, when Strickland arrived home, was Kaitlin there? What happened when they first encountered one another? What did he say? What did she say? So I'm not going to take it further than that. We are.
Well, I must say I'm quite impressed with this. Even if I say so myself, I think it's quite good analysis. I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing. I sometimes go to a video made some time ago, and I'm like, cringe. But pretty happy with that. Let's see if there's one I'm not happy with. Strickland originally acted as though he did not know who Wilson was.
Now, we don't have any evidence like that. We kind of lost the track, lost the footprint in the sand when she landed there at LaGuardia Airport. Yeah, if Kaitlin is out there watching or anyone that is helping her, we ask you to come forward. Have Kaitlin or Kaitlin yourself surrender to authorities. It's just a matter of time. We're constantly working day in and day out. And we'd like to safely bring you into custody so that, you'll have your day in court and you'll be able to tell your side of the story.
Kaitlin Armstrong, she's still on the run. It seems like she's been on the run for almost 20 days. We're approaching 3 weeks, but it's not as though there's no information. Some things have taken place. You've just heard Deputy Brandon Fuller, I think he's from the U.S. Marshal Service, telling News Nation Prime, surrender, come forward. I really don't think that is likely to happen here, but that is nevertheless what they're saying. He also says in that they basically lost all track of her when she landed at LaGuardia in New York. Now, since then, there was a memorial cycle ride in honor of the cyclist that died, Mo Wilson. The Austin, Texas cyclist gathered in her honor. And obviously, it's not where Mo Wilson's from, but they nevertheless did gather. I've got to say, it's really tough seeing this because I lost a close friend of mine about 8 months ago. And there's also a memorial ride for him in his hometown, up to his house and so on. In fact, I actually wanted to start a memorial ride where I was. And so this cuts close to home for me and close to the bone. In terms of an article from velonews.com, they say that someone spoke at this memorial gathering on Memorial Day, and they basically just said the violence that took Mo's life was not okay, and we are not okay. Speaking on the stone steps of the federal courthouse, that was on Sunday afternoon, overlooking a crowd of about 100 people, all of them from Austin. And that was like in 100-degree heat in downtown Austin. Now, I want you to look at this image. This is an image of the Deep Eddy Pool. And I want you to have a look at this image and look at the word that is peeking out between the treetops in the background. You see it? I have since found another image of that pool on News Nation, which shows a pool there with lanes in it. So it is quite possible that they were both training there, that it wasn't just a casual encounter. We just don't know for sure either way. But they were both sports people, and so who knows what they were doing. The aspect I want to highlight in this video is something that has come through on cycling news, something I didn't really realize. Apparently, there are something like 4 new warrants that have come out. And in any event, apparently Strickland originally acted as though he did not know who Mo Wilson was, but eventually admitted to knowing her. That is according to the text in one of these warrants. So we're going to quickly go through the timeline and just do a quick review of it. So you may recall that Mo...
So what I think is interesting with this case is the potential situation where someone is in love with somebody else, or someone is in a relationship with someone else, and they not being honest. Like maybe they like the other person, and maybe there's mutual attraction, but there's not actual honesty going on, right? And in a way, with the Suzanne Morphew case, you have the same thing where not quite the same, but where Jeff Libler simply doesn't come forward to say anything about what he knows. Is that real love, right? And you might say, well, life's not like that, or you couldn't expect someone to do that. But what we nevertheless trying to look at is, was Mo loving this guy or interested in this guy from an honest perspective, and was he being honest towards her, I guess, is the question. Was he in the relationship under honest pretenses or not?
Is not from Austin, Texas. She flew into Austin on May 10th, the day before she lost her life, and she was there for an event that would have been held on May 14 in Hyco, located between Austin and Dallas. And I believe Colin Strickland would also have taken part in that same event, also on May 14. So obviously, him taking part would certainly have made Kaitlin aware that both of them have this opportunity of coming together again. And she knew, Kaitlin Armstrong knew that they had prior engagements with one another, prior interactions that had ultimately excluded her. Anyway, so a woman from Maple Avenue and a friend of Wilson's picked her up from the airport. Then we go to May 11th. This is the day of the incident. We go to about 5:30 p.m. At 5:30, the friend that Mo was staying with left her own home, and that's in Maple Avenue, and received a text from Mo saying that she's going to meet up with a friend called Colin.
Can you imagine being in a situation like that where you have a home and you invite someone to stay with you, or someone comes and stays with you, and you arrive back home only to find your home has become a murder scene? How that must really turn things upside down, right? For I think her name ends with Cash. I think Kaitlin Cash, was that her name?
And later, that Colin was fully identified by police as Colin Strickland. She said she was going to go swimming. Then, as the friend left the residence, that's her own residence, she saw a large bicycle travel bag right next to the front door on an elevated porch. And I think she asked Mo to take the bag inside the house before she leaves so that no one steals it. Now we go about 15-minute incidents.
I think we're going to stop there. I would actually like to go into the affidavit. I'm not sure if we're going to... Did Kaitlin have help? Kaitlin had $450,000. I think that was of Colin's money. And, I think one's got to wonder, was Colin in a relationship with Mo thinking that it was likely to become a serious relationship, or was he just, I guess, philandering? What I mean is, if he was in like a very serious financial relationships with Kaitlin, then how realistic was it to have a fling with somebody else? And I suppose one could say the same in a way about Suzanne Morphew. If her husband owed her huge amounts of money, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen in the world. Some people engage in activities that are very ill-advised. But when there are hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake and infidelity, can that lead to serious disaster, right? Anyway, I'm not going to take it further than that. I do want to deal with the affidavit, but we won't be doing that here. I do intend to cover the Morphew case while I'm in America, and also the Mo Wilson case also while I'm in America. I'll probably do them alternately, one live on this case, one on the other, and then I'll try and provide, as I did when I was in Boise, a little bit of Twitter updates. So if you're interested in this case and the trial, follow me on Twitter. And then also some updates from the courtroom. I need to decide whether to do members only or how I'm going to do that. But yeah, we'll see. As I say, I do plan on going to Costa Rica. And so a friend of mine from school actually put on his Instagram, literally in the last day, footage of a beach in Costa Rica. And it certainly does look quite heavenly. It really does look like a wonderful place to be. So I'm actually looking forward to being there. So yeah, I also plan on doing a live on the John Benet Ramsey case, dealing with the analysis of that 1 hour interview. So I'm going to be continuing that. I'll probably do it tomorrow or Tuesday. So look out for that. Chelsea says it's gorgeous there. Josephine, welcome, new member. Okay. I'm also going to be doing members only videos when I'm on the road in America. I just don't feel it's appropriate to do. I just don't think it's safe to do sort of videos when I'm somewhere, and then I don't think everybody should know exactly where I am. So that's why that is members only. Jay Karras says Costa Rica will be beautiful. Cool. Baby Kisser says it's gorgeous, but I've only seen pics and videos. And I've got to admit that when I went to America, and when I was in Boulder, and when my path was crossing that of Gabby Petito, and when I was in Moscow, Idaho, and California, and on and on and on, I couldn't help feeling I was entering the territory of certain fairy tales. When I went to Frederick, Colorado, where the Watts family lived, and I walked and drove down those roads, those cookie cutter neighborhoods, I couldn't help feeling that I was in someone else's fairy tale, and I could recognize that fairy tale. You could feel how nice everything was. I went with Jean to the Lazy Dog restaurant and had a fantastic meal. It really was good food, an enjoyable atmosphere. When you're in Boulder, you can see that it could have been a really nice place to live and grow up if you were a kid. Go bicycling, go hiking up the mountains, and on and on and on. And so part of that is looking at Kaitlin's fairy tale when she went to Costa Rica. But I think the challenge is also to us to say, what is your fairy tale, and how safe is it to be believing in it? And in other words, you should have some kind of something that you're working towards, or some result that you are investing in, right? I'm not saying don't have dreams or whatever, but it does need to be grounded in reality. So in other words, dream realistically. It seems to be a bit of a contradiction in terms, but your fairy tale needs to be realistic. Otherwise, you might end up in a nightmare. I guess that's the point. And so perhaps by looking at various fairy tales, I can find the one that makes the most sense to me, I guess. That's part of the thinking. I haven't really thought about it a whole lot, but that's part of that thought process. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Power is also not always an easily defined thing. By the way, I saw a fantastic story. Let's see if I can find it. What's it, the most beautiful? Thing in the world, Matt. It's called All the Beauty in the World. So I'm going to end off on hopefully a positive note. I came across this book, and it's called All the Beauty in the World, and it's about a guy who, I think his older brother suddenly gets cancer and dies, and he decides to quit his job. He's a writer for the New Yorker, and he decides to quit his job, and he becomes a security guard at the Met, which I think he does for 10 years. And all he wants to do is stand around and get closure in terms of this tragedy to his brother. And it's quite a rare thing where somebody closes the books on something that is already quite successful and decides to downsize when they're still quite young, and nevertheless find meaning and beauty in something that is right there. And that's what makes this story quite interesting. It kind of makes me wonder, is there a path one should take where you actually work less, where you're more in the moment, where it's not about more money, it's about less money. It's not about more work, it's about less work. But it doesn't mean that you're lazy. It means that you are existing in a space that's more meaningful and edifying. And so this guy decides to become a security guard, and he has this incredible experience. He's not a dummy. He's a really well-educated, eloquent, qualified chap, and he decides to become a security guard at the Met, and he has this incredible experience. And so my question is, and it's a kind of Team Peachtree question, what thing like that do we need to be doing, where we get less money or less of whatever it is we think, but we get more of what we really need? We get more spiritual food. We get more of whatever that space is that we need in our hearts and our minds, by taking a different path, right? And so reading this, reading about his story was really a reminder about living creatively and doing things spontaneously that fit in with your idea of what a good life is, not somebody else's. There's a little bit of information on this book. Millions of people climb the grand marble staircase to visit the Met. I'm one of them. In fact, I did it twice. Did it once with Stephanie and once with another Stephanie, but only a select few have unrestricted access to every nook and cranny. They're the guards who roam unobtrusively in dark suits. Patrick Bringley never thought he'd be one of them. Then his older brother was diagnosed with fatal cancer. And so, wow, I've earned a free book. Okay. But the bottom line is, I don't know if you see what I'm getting at. In the middle of tragedy, in the middle of adversity, in the middle of disaster, can be something that redirects your life in a way that saves your life, where your life becomes a lot richer and more meaningful. You end up living a much better life, in a way, thanks to somebody else's tragedy, right? In other words, that's the silver lining, that someone goes through something horrible and you pay attention to it, and then you notice something in yourself and you realize, I was also doing that, or I also need to do that. Does that make sense? And so that's such a powerful part of this story. The story of Mo Wilson is about the failure, to pursue a dream and to have it violently, horribly stolen away. And so then the question is, her dream was stolen, but she had a dream and she was on her way to realizing it. What are our dreams? And how can we be realistic about going after them so that we don't get stung by the boomeranging dynamic that is out there? How can we choose our fairy tale wisely, but a fairy tale that's going to nourish us, right? That's really the thing that I'm getting at through this story, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's it from my side. That's right. Correct. Cool. So can you see, like, this is ostensibly not about the money. This is about having an experience of life and entering the fabric of these bicycle riders and the bicycle community of Austin, and through that getting a sense of, this is for me and maybe that's not for me. In other words, just getting an experience of another world that helps to remind you of who you are and what fairy tales are important to you, realistic fairy tales. So I hope in my journey towards that, it's going to awaken something in you guys, something meaningful, and something that's a little bit beyond the traditional fodder you get in true crime, which is shocking, sensational, negative stories about what human beings do to one another. Instead, it's about what can we find for ourselves that is going to take us into a better place where our lives are going to be enriched. Isn't that something worth thinking about? Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Thanks a lot. There we go. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It is epiphany time. So I don't know if I'm going to have epiphanies. I'm going to Texas. I might go all the way there and come back with none. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going all the way there. Who knows, maybe the weather will be horrible and I'll come back with no epiphanies, but I wouldn't count on it. I'm pretty sure that there will be. One's also just got to be open to it. So we'll see. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining me. I'm really glad that we had almost 200 of you guys in chat for a while. I do think it's a worthwhile topic, so I will be continuing it. Yeah, just thanks a lot to the mods that are here. Stephanie, Chelsea, Sharon, Terry Dean, all of you guys, thanks a lot for being here. Thanks to all the members. Thanks a lot, members, for sticking by me. You're going to get your reward in the next month or so. I'll be putting up quite a lot of members-only content whenever I've got a moment in an airport or on the road or whatever. I'll try and set aside a couple of minutes just to show you where I am, right? That'll be video, not just photos. If I have an epiphany, you guys will be the first to get it. So I don't know if you can put a price on that. anyway, that's it for me. I'm in quite a good mood today because we seem to have a lucky win against France. So I'll definitely be watching the rest of the World Cup rugby tournament. See how South Africa does in that. We are the defending champions, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks everyone. Thanks a lot for the super chats, and welcome to all the new subscribers. Yeah, please do subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see you guys next time. I hope you guys have a brilliant week, and also hope I have a good week. Got quite a lot that I need to sort out, get through, organize this week. Also, yeah, we looking at what's happening in Israel. Definitely very concerning. I hope this little world is going to be able to hold itself together. That we definitely want to send our prayers and positive thoughts in that direction. Take care, guys. Hope you have a good week, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.